people are here for the first time? If you just, quite a few? Okay. So when Lisa, when Ms. Hill was giving instruction, did she talk at all about the center and who founded it, or that kind of background?
I think she did.
She did?
Yeah.
Okay. And in the process, did she introduce our teachers to you? No? So I'll start there then. Here on my left is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and up here, pardon me, on my right, your left, is his eldest son, who's our current spiritual leader and director, Sakyong Nipong Rinpoche. And this particular center has been here for a long time, somewhere in the 70s, I think, maybe 1978, 77, I can't, this actual space. But the Shambhala Center in Vancouver goes back to the early 70s. And it comes directly out of Chogyam Trungpa's vision of being able to create centers where people could walk in off the street and receive instruction in mindfulness, awareness, meditation practice free. And from students who had practiced themselves, not necessarily high-level Lama-type instructors, but just regular people who had used the teachings and the meditation practices in their day-to-day life and had personal experience of that gave them the inspiration to want to offer back into the community in some way. So in 1970, that was a very extraordinary thing for a Zen master or a Tibetan master or any of what I think of as the last generation of the great masters. That was not what they were doing with their students. So Chogyam Trungpa had a reputation for being unusual in his teaching methods and for trusting the ordinary person with really high-level teachings in a way that often drew criticism from other teachers, and at the same time really inspired what I think of as our current generation of really good teachers. So like Sakyong Nipong Rinpoche and his peers all basically were very inspired by the way that Chogyam Trungpa taught. And part of what he said was that everything that you do in your life, everything, has the potential to enlighten you. Everything has the potential for enlightened wisdom. So even your craziest behavior, your most addicted, off-the-wall, what seems like really stupid behavior, has inherently within it somewhere some seed of wisdom, some seed of innate intelligence, or some seed of brilliant awareness or awake mind. We talk about it in lots of different ways, but he's really saying that, you know, you and I are just regular people, and both of us have the same mind. Underneath culture, underneath language, underneath all of what we think of as our conditioned behaviors, our learned behaviors. If you could sort of, Fritz Perls talked about being able to peel the onion layers of our personality down. What do you come up with when you sort of peel away all the learning? It's this amazing quality of mind that's knowing, but doesn't really centralize around me, Margaret. And at the same time that it's knowing, it's open, and it has some kind of mirror-like resonance with other people. So when that's coming up in me and being expressed, you recognize it, I recognize it in you, you recognize it in me. So we have this other way of communicating that doesn't actually depend on our personality at all. So when we say unconditioned, we actually mean unconditioned. So someone said to me today, a woman who's working deeply with addiction, I'm a counselor, so we were talking about that. And she said, well, a lot of stuff's changing in my life right now, and I feel like I'm just discovering something that's innate, that's been in me always. And what do you mean always? She said, I think I came into the world with this, born with it. And she's talking about what you might think of as her spirituality or her wisdom mind, or what Chogyam Trungpa would have said was enlightened mind. So if you think about that, if that's your birthright, if that's how you come into the world, and that's there in some mysterious, in a way, an effable kind of manner, like you can't kind of go, oh, it's this, and just kind of touch it and hold on to it and shape it, because it actually, in a way, doesn't belong to you or to me. We don't really own it. That's not a very modern Western way of thinking. We actually, I don't know about you, but I actually think I own my body, and I have certain rights about it, and you better watch out if you violate them. I'm not too good with, people hurting me physically, etc. I'm pretty attached at that level. So what actually then, what do we do with that? Like, what's that all about? And one of the ways that Chogyam Trungpa was unusual was that he taught through the arts. He helped to start, inspired Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. And he also inspired a whole generation of artists to gather in Boulder in the summers for summer institutes, and then to integrate that into the university. So some of you might know the Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, Disembodied Poetics, is that the... So Allen Ginsberg taught there, Anne Waldman, many other very famous current poets have come out of that school. A lot of people interested in movement and dance, like Arowana Hayashi or Lanny Harrison, people who have been really instrumental in bringing forward modern dance and improvisation in their choreography. Meredith Monk. In the jazz world, Jerry Granelli. He's just this incredibly famous, not just incredibly famous, it's not really what I want to say about him. He's just sort of, I think of him as like this wizard. He's a jazz wizard. And when he starts to teach, his whole body teaches. And he's, done a lot of different things at different times, but not just at Naropa in the early days. In Berlin, he founded a school for musicians and has brought that back to North America, to Halifax. So there's a whole tradition within the Shambhala community of art, and a lot of artists who are currently in the world in some way expressing the same teachings that we learn sitting on the cushion. So I think of it as meditation in action, or I think of it as working with expressive mind, and actually looking for the ways that you can evoke your own creative process in your day-to-day life. So Chogyam Trungpa talked a lot about the art of living in everyday life. He talked about art as a day-to-day kind of process, and truth as something that was universal and totally accessible to everybody. So there's an ordinariness about the way he presented the teachings. and an accessibility. They were for everybody. And at the same time, there was this magic that happened. And that magic had to do with understanding how to take what you learn on the cushion into your life in a moment-to-moment kind of way and be creative with whatever it is you were doing. So whether that's how you arrange your dishes in your cupboard, or where the chair goes in the living room. It makes a big difference to how you feel in your living space, the way you arrange your furniture. So when I went to sit down tonight, I've forgotten your first name. Christian said to me, "How's this chair, Margaret?" And I said, "No way. Because this chair, when you sit in it, actually is a dysfunctional chair. It's hard to sit and actually be present and available to yourself in a chair where you kind of sink right down into the bottom of it, and then the arms are up here." So I thought, he said, "You look sort of funny," and I said, "Yeah, I feel like Flipper." You know, like, everybody know who Flipper is?
Yes.
Yes, you all know who Flipper is, okay. So, it's simple, but it's the design of the chair. And the design of the chair has a lot to do with your posture, whether or not you can actually sit on that chair and meditate is really important in this environment. If it puts you out of alignment, then you're going to have a really hard time staying with your innate intelligence or even noticing it when you're practicing. There'll be some way in which you feel a little bit off or a little bit antsy, restless, uncertain if what you're doing is right, a lot of self-doubt. And those things tend to melt or dissolve when you find the place where your head and your heart and your, pardon me, your guts are in alignment with each other and they're harmonized and working together. So creativity from this point of view is actually that. The creative process is finding the ways that you're present and that you embody that awake quality of your mind in the day-to-day minutiae and ordinariness of what you're doing. So it's not so much about creating a masterpiece or the product of your art, but learning to actually be present. If you're an artist or a musician, a dancer, someone who does theater, learning to be present in that way is just really seen as sort of basic skill set for an artist. You have to embody your own energy in order to be convincing in your communication, no matter what it is, what medium you're trying to communicate through. So that's really true for visual artists as well. Or for the people who like do the flower arranging here. Whoops, that one's a little past its prime. You could take this one as a lesson in impermanence. You know, you watch it bloom, you watch it stay, and then you watch it die. Right? Everything goes through those cycles. So we're like that, and everything we create is like that. We have the moment of openness, where some sort of inspiration moves us, we're passionate, we have an idea, we want to write, we want to draw, we want to paint, or we want to solve a problem, we have a project we want to do in a particular way. So there's that inspiring kind of quality, just sort of like fire energy, elemental, you know, it's like spring, it's rising up, giving birth, all those kinds of metaphors. And then just sort of inevitably, self-reflexively, in some way, some part of us goes, "Huh, I'm not so sure." And we have a second thought about whatever our inspiration was, and then we start to look at it with a different part of our mind, And when we begin to regard ourselves from that place of self-criticism or that judgmental aspect of our mind, it magnifies and adds to whatever hesitation might have been in that original moment. And hesitation grows and becomes doubt. And doubt becomes lack of self-confidence. And maybe then along with the lack of self-confidence goes anxiety. And along with the anxiety goes second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth thought about it. And pretty soon we're ruminating and thinking, and we're kind of a long way away from just being here and feeling what's in my hand, touching, smelling. You know, since I started to touch this at the beginning of talking, it's warmed up. It was cool, you know, but now it's getting soft and kind of mushy, sort of like somebody's heart when it's open, right, that way. And you can do all kinds of things with it. And then, when you're really present, your curiosity kicks in. It's like, oh, what else can I do with this? It sort of tears. So this afternoon, I was in actually it was a really wonderful class. Those of you who were here last week, I talked a bit about working in the high schools in the art program. And so this afternoon, I was in a grade 12 class with students who had finished a project on open-heartedness in their art. And their assignment today was they had to welcome a class of 8 and 9-year-olds into their art room, and then they had to share their project that they'd been doing on their childhood memories and what was significant about the objects they'd drawn and what made them happy. They had to share that with the 8-year-old or the 9-year-old little buddy, and then talk to their little buddy about maybe what would be one memory or one thing in their life that made them happy, and then create art together. So they had to teach their little buddy how to do their mindfulness practice, and then how to take that into the art and create something together. So I thought, wow, 8 years old. And their teacher says, okay, let's do our breathing. And they all go. And their eyes just shut, they're like this, and the grade 12 students are kind of like looking around, and then they do the same thing, right? So they all sit up, take really good posture, and they just breathe. And then they listen to the sound of the bell, and listen until they hear the end of the bell. And then they're all smiley face, and the grade 12 teacher says, okay, so you show us how you breathe, I'll show you how we move. And she begins to show them how to lift the sky, and push down to the earth, and lift to the sky. So this is so precious. These 17-year-old, 18-year-olds face to face with a little kid who's 8 or 9, and the two of them are doing this together, and way up to the top of the sky and down. And then my job was to take that and say, okay, now let's take that and put it in the art. So what they had to work with was clay like this, and I came home with my piece of clay. And so maybe you could do this with me. So this is a mindfulness exercise in how to actually be present in your hands. And your hands, because it's often our hands that we're going to create with. That's where we're going to hold a pen or a paintbrush, or one of the girls, grade 12 girls, came in today and said to the classroom teacher, Miss Smith, where's the saw? And I said, saw? What do you want the saw for? She said, oh, you should come and see what I'm doing. And she had this humongous block of styrofoam, and she was carving a giant rat with a saw. And the rat is another story. But you get a feel for what that classroom is like. Right? Kids come in, they feel totally at home there. They know where things are, they feel like it's their place, they own it, and they embody what's being taught. The students embody what's being taught. And I think that's the criteria. Like, if you're going to measure whether or not you got a good teacher, and this holds true for us as well, you look around at who their students are and see whether or not their students embody the teachings. And that gives you some idea of who's in front of you, like who I am, because I'm sitting in the chair right now, so for the moment I'm the teacher. It's a really important thing. So looking around the room and seeing those grade 12 students and how good they were with the 8-year-olds and the 9-year-olds, and how all of them could actually talk about what empathy meant to them, what compassion meant to them, and they could say why something made them happy or why they liked a particular piece of art. So they're actually learning to follow their curiosity and to do that in a way that brings them into harmony in the way I was talking about, with some sense of realization. So this is actually a quote from my husband, from Brian. Within each of us, there is a deep source of integrity, a point of personal truth that is our lodestone and illumines the path of confidence, natural intelligence, innate wisdom, and freedom. Within each of us, there is a deep source of integrity, a point of personal truth that is our lodestone. It illumines the path of confidence, natural intelligence, innate wisdom, and freedom. So that's another way of saying what Chogyam Trungpa said, when he said that curiosity is the essence of the artist. Inside of all of us is the capacity for that curiosity that opens our heart, that lets us explore the world, and that takes us to some personal felt sense of what's right, or what's real, or what's true for us. And every one of us knows it. So I'm going to assume that everybody in the room has told a lie at some point. Never. Somebody said never. Whoa. Okay. So you know when you've lied, right? How do you know? Anybody? How do you know? What's it feel like to tell a lie? What was back there?
I said guilt.
Guilt. You feel guilt. Anybody else?
Yeah, uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. And you're
I said uncomfortable.
uncomfortable too?
Yeah. Shame.
Shame? Any more?
There's no going back.
There's no going back. Say some more about that.
Well, if you say something, that's why it's best to avoid lying, but if you say something that's not true, you know it's not true, you can't just fish back the word. You either gotta find a way to sell it or come clean.
Yes, you have to find a way to sell it or come clean. Or as they might say in AA, you're busted. Yeah, you have to find a way to sell it, so then you know that it's, you're pushing something, you're marketing yourself in some kind of way. And you know that there's a phoniness or a lack of integrity in it. Or you come clean, just even the use of that word, clean, has an element of reality and truth in it. Right? There's some sense of letting go of whatever the opposite of clean is. So whatever that discomfort or shame or guilt, letting go of that and going, okay, here it is. In the light of day, we often say, this is what's really happening. Here's what's going on.
I almost think that sense of shame or guilt or whatever is kind of a gift, because I worry about people who lie so pathologically and so automatically that they stop feeling that. And I work with people who occasionally I think maybe like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at least if you have this sense that it's there, then at least you can do the coming clean and reflecting and
That's right.
and then moving forward with it.
Yeah, so what's your name?
David.
David? So you're pointing at the intelligence in our craziness, right? Like in the shame is intelligence, because there's some quality of knowing some quality of recognition there, of like, oh, okay. This doesn't feel right to me, and I know in some part of myself, I know that it doesn't feel right. So that's our wisdom mind speaking inside of what, I don't know how you feel shame, but for me, it's like one of the grottiest emotions that there are, and most of us do whatever we can to just kind of like get out of it really, really quickly. And I'm gonna ask Michael what he's gonna say, and then we're gonna come back to like how we wanna get out of shame.
I think what I was gonna say is, as far as the guilt thing, it's actually, it's probably not a good thing to never feel guilt, because if you never feel guilt, psychopaths don't feel guilt unless you want, I don't think that's something that, should be admired, so, generally if you have a conscience, you're gonna feel guilt for some things you do.
Yes, yes. You should feel, there's some things you should feel sorry about, or regret, or, some capacity to recognize when you've hurt somebody else. But if you don't have whatever that is, bravery or courage to come clean with what's going on, then you might decide to get rid of the guilt or get rid of the shame another way. And that's what addiction is all about. It's pretty much kind of at the level of like sort of like a 9-month-old baby. You're at the crawling stage and the baby looks over and goes, ooh, pretty, and starts crawling towards whatever the shiny, pretty object is. So a lot of us in our adult life just kind of are led around by our nose, searching for and going after shiny, pretty objects, just like a child. So you see the pair of, $200 shoes in the window that are like this year's style and got the right heel and they go just right with the dress that I haven't worn for 3 years, but maybe if I had the shoes, I'd wear the dress. You buy the shoes. Or the right, leather jacket, or time to throw out. I actually remember being in one of my friend's houses where she just kind of stood in her bathroom and said, it's just time to get rid of this stuff. And I thought she meant she was going to recycle stuff. No, she meant it was time to get rid of all the towels, all the linens, and start over again.